If there's one thing that wrestling promoters at any level have consistently struggled with throughout history, it's planning for the future. Hey, things might be looking good now, but what happens if your top guy gets hurt, or if they get upset and bail? If they're any good, once they leave, they could take viewers with them. Of course, being able to smoothly replace outgoing main event talent is a lot easier said than done, and it's truly an unenviable task. But damn it, they've got to try. That's why this week, I'm going to rank them, my picks for the top 8 biggest failed attempts at trying to replace another wrestling star. But first, hit that like button, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret if you haven't, and be sure to hit the bell icon too. Let's begin. Number 8, Rey Mysterio and Alberto Del Rio for Eddie Guerrero. From Bruno to Hogan to Austin, for most of the 20th century, the WWF was built on the Great White Hope, the Italian or Irish or Texan carrying the torch. But one talent proved so charismatic that even Vince McMahon couldn't deny his appeal to not only Latino viewers, but to those all over the world. As 2003 came to a close, Eddie Guerrero's popularity shot up like a rocket, resulting in him winning the WWE title from Brock Lesnar at No Way Out 04. Along the way, the company noticed a huge rise in the number of Latino fans who were engaging with the product, and ever since Eddie's tragic passing in November of 2005, it seems as though WWE has still been searching for the next big Latino star who can leap out of Eddie's shadow. They first tried with Eddie's friend and rival, Rey Mysterio, building Rey's chase for the World Heavyweight title as a tribute to Latino heat. It culminated with an amazing world title win at Mania 22, and things felt alright, until Rey's golden moment soured into one of the worst main event pushes ever conceived. He was destroyed by much larger guys like Mark Henry and the Great Khali, and not so much larger guys like Finlay, while somehow still managing to hold on to his championship. Then Eddie's nephew Chavo mercifully cost him the belt 4 months after he won it. Good job making both Rey and the ghost of Eddie look like shit. Make no mistake, Mysterio is still one of WWE's most marketable stars, and they've no doubt made a mint off of his likeness. But I believe there's a difference between that and being considered the face of the company, which Rey is not, never was, and that angle he had back in 2006 was not going to help matters. Then WWE thought they might have found their next Eddie in 2010, when Alberto Del Rio first came to the main roster. The son of Lucha Libre legend Dos Caras, the guy had everything that Rey Mysterio lacked: size, movie star looks, and a certain moxie on the microphone. For the first few years of his run, Del Rio was portrayed as Mexico's answer to the $1 Million Man, displaying zero redeemable qualities while cheating his way to championships. Then after losing a few consecutive feuds to top babyfaces, Burt suddenly had a change of heart by TLC 2012 in December, and was cheered for saving his personal ring announcer Ricardo Rodriguez from the three-man band on the pre-show. Later that night, he teamed with The Miz and the Brooklyn Brawler to take out the self-proclaimed rock stars. Oh shit, y'all, big hero Del Rio has arrived! Hey, when you get the Brawler rub, the office has got big plans for you, kid. A few weeks later on SmackDown, Del Rio fought and beat the Big Show for the world title in a last man standing match. The crowd in attendance dug it, but keep in mind, Alberto was pretty much the same character that he was before his turn the previous month. Until recently, this guy had been trashing everyone and everything. He never really repented for his misdeeds. And now WWE expected the fans to go into the new year forgetting about all that? Who they think he was? Steve Austin in 2001? Del Rio would have a few more matches with Show over the belt before moving on to an even more lukewarm heel for WrestleMania. Much like Del Rio, Jack Swagger was another permanent fixture in the mid-card until they up and made him #1 contender at Elimination Chamber 2013. With Zeb Coulter by his side, the storyline became somewhat of a proxy for the immigration debate in America. Think JBL versus Eddie, but with much more boring people. The fans didn't buy Alberto as a true blue babyface, or even a complicated one really, while Swagger's heat was mild at best. It didn't help things that they neutered their own story by breaking the fourth wall to tell Glenn Beck, hey y'all, this shit is fake, or that Jackie Swags himself got arrested for a DUI 1 month before Mania. Their title match was fine, though its outcome was never in doubt. The loudest pop Del Rio ever heard as a babyface was for when heel Dolph Ziggler cashed in on him the Raw after WrestleMania. Though his Gonzo was already cocido, Del Rio putted around as a face for a couple more months, finally solidifying a double turn between he and Ziggler that June. The logic behind wanting Rey Mysterio as a lovable babyface to draw in Latino viewers makes all sorts of sense, but why they thought they could just hit a switch and expect the fans to embrace this unlikable character in Del Rio, I'll never understand. Then again, considering all the trouble that guy's made in the last decade or so, WWE dodged a real beamer there. Number 7. Corporal Kirchner for Sergeant Slaughter. By the end of 1984, Hulk Hogan wasn't the only popular symbol of Americana in the WWF. Sergeant Slaughter was nearly as popular as the Immortal One, thanks in large part to his feud with the Iron Sheik. But when the Hasbro Toy Company approached Slaughter with a deal to join the ranks of G.I. Joe, Vince McMahon wanted a cut of the action, prompting the Sarge to take Hasbro's money and run. And while his wrestling career sank into the mediocrity of the AWA for the rest of the 80s, he no doubt cried all the way to the bank. Now look, I'm no businessman, and I'm sure the WWF was within their rights to ask for a cut, but what makes more of an impact in the long term? Some toy money residuals, or some free advertising and exposure on one of the hottest toy and TV franchises of the 1980s, with a loyal and enduring fan base that exists to this day? But hey, no problem, all you need is some camo paint and army fatigues and boom, instant star. After serving as a jobber in the Federation, occasionally under a mask as Mr. X, R.T. Reynolds was recast as Corporal Kirchner. Unlike Slaughter, Kirchner actually did serve in the military as a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne. However, that was all the corporal had over the sergeant. It was hardly fair to put Kirchner, who was barely 2 years into wrestling at this time, in the figurative boots of a seasoned vet who developed his gimmick over several years. After the old college try, which saw Kirchner feud with Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik, he slowly fell down the card back to the jobber role he began with. Number 6. Nikita Koloff for Magnum TA. Sometimes you can tell that someone is just made to be in professional wrestling with a single look, as was the case with Nikita Koloff in 1984. Dusty Rhodes took one glance at Nikita, who'd shown up to a TV taping at the behest of his good friend Road Warrior Animal, told him to shave his head, and made him the nephew of Ivan Koloff, and the rest was history. With some of the best on-the-job training one could ask for, the inexperienced rookie was soon destroying jobbers left and right while building his aura. Arguably, the most memorable run of Nikita's career began in the summer of '86 during his Best of 7 series with Magnum TA, one of the hottest up-and-coming babyfaces in the country. The feud saw the big bald Ruski win the series and the US title, which seemingly freed up Magnum to chase after Ric Flair and the NWA World title en route to that year's Starrcade. But tragedy struck that October when Magnum got into a horrific car crash and suffered career-ending injuries. Necessity often breeds innovation, and in this case, Dusty, now in need of a new tag team partner against the Four Horsemen, decided that Koloff could fit the role perfectly. And at first, it was a very smart decision. But without the experience or the nuance to be a convincing, likable babyface, Nikita's stock dwindled soon after that initial success. Then after he lost some muscle mass and grew a bad-looking buzz cut, all that cool mystique had vanished. At the end of '87, he beat Terry Taylor in a TV title unification match. But compare that to the previous year when he was in the main event with Ric Flair over the world title, and that comes off like a very polite fall from grace. While it was certainly worth a shot, Nikita simply wasn't able to inherit the popularity of the man he replaced in the long run. Number 5. Butch Reed and others for the Junkyard Dog. When it comes to the history of racism in wrestling, few promoters have as complicated a legacy as Bill Watts. In early 1993, he was fired as WCW's head booker after Turner exec Hank Aaron read some of his inflammatory comments from an interview a year prior. But also, this is the same guy who booked Ron Simmons to become the first black WCW champion. And before that, he was considered a huge anomaly when it came to booking black talent in Mid-South wrestling. He had built his promotion around a black star in the Junkyard Dog and had even booked multiple black wrestlers in an era when many promotions would have only one, if that. This is because at the time, some promoters simply considered being black a gimmick in and of itself, and they didn't want too many of those around, I guess. Well, what the hell are all the white guys supposed to be then? After JYD suddenly left Mid-South for the WWF in the summer of 1984, the Cowboy tried and failed to recapture the magic. Watts immediately buried the dog on television, stating that JYD feared Butch Reed, whom he was feuding with at the time. After that, he turned Reed babyface and attempted to move him into the dog's spot, but it didn't pan out. Watts chased that junkyard dragon through 1985, 86, and 87 with talents such as George Wells of WrestleMania 2 fame, the Snowman, and Savannah Jack by the time the company had rebranded to the Universal Wrestling Federation, parentheses, not the Herb Abrams version. It seems that Bill Watts failed to understand what had made the Junkyard Dog an all-time great territorial babyface, and by trying so hard to replace him, all Watts had proved was that the secret to being a star was more than skin deep. Number 4. Lance Von Erich for the Von Erichs. We have seen countless examples of wrestlers being recast into different gimmicks. Sometimes it works, but when it doesn't, by and large, I believe that most of them can be forgiven. This one, however, feels like a bridge too far. By 1985, the Von Erich family had already taken its fair share of hits. Most recently, they dealt with the tragic death of David overseas. Then younger brother Mike would be shelved with toxic shock syndrome, inadvertently leading to his suicide in 1987. With the cracks beginning to show in the family empire that ruled Texas wrestling, Papa Fritz Von Erich decided the best way to turn tragedy into glory for the Von Erich name was to make a new one up. Fritz looked far, but not too far, to find Ricky Vaughn, a local high school football star whom Fritz had shipped off to the Portland territory for seasoning before debuting him to his own audience as Lance Von Erich, the kayfabe son of Fritz's kayfabe brother Waldo. Of the myriad number of problems with this character existing in the first place, one of which was Lance was too recognizable from his days playing football to be believed as a Von Erich relative, which, isn't that just the most Texas problem to have? The obvious lie of Lance's lineage left a huge mark on the credibility and image of the Von Erich family. Then came the drug issues and additional deaths among the actual family members to drag it down even more. Nevertheless, the company stuck with Lance for a while until the non-Erich asked for more money. Ricky Vaughn soon moved to a rival territory, leading to Fritz burying him on air as a faker. But considering Fritz himself was a fake German, does that make him both the pot and the kettle? Number 3. Pedro Morales and Bob Backlund for Bruno Sammartino. Before Hulk Hogan came along and captured the cultural zeitgeist that younger fans could rally around, the WWF spent a lot of time trying to figure out who could cover for when their top star went away. After 8 years on top, Bruno wanted to take a break from the grind, and it was up to Vince McMahon Sr. to find his replacement. Similar to when he chose Sammartino to help rally the Italian community, Vince Sr. tapped Pedro Morales, a 10-year vet with a large Puerto Rican fan base in the Northeast, to be the next top man. Pedro would go on to win the world title in February of 1971. While Morales was very popular at Madison Square Garden, he struggled to match Bruno's draw in the WWF's other key cities like Boston, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. Morales still had a respectable reign, over 1,000 days as champion, waging memorable wars with the likes of Blackjack Mulligan, Fred Blassie, and even a huge babyface versus babyface match against Bruno himself at Shea Stadium in 1972. As soon as Bruno agreed to retake the mantle in '74, Morales soon moved back to a top mid-Carter role, eventually becoming the company's first Triple Crown champion. But he arguably held on for a bit too long, quitting the WWF in 1987 after being relegated to near jobber status. There's a strong argument to be made that superstar Billy Graham, the one who ended Bruno's second run as champion in 1977, could have been the next true standard bearer, but unfortunately for him, Vince Sr. was a man of his word. The day Graham won the championship, he was told how long he would hold it for and that he would lose it to Bob Backlund when it was time. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. A former amateur wrestling standout who came to the WWF in '76, Backlund was positioned as the company's next top guy, holding their world title for the better part of 6 years. But the longer he stayed on top, the more his appeal began to wane, as much cooler babyfaces like Superfly Jimmy Snuka came onto the scene. Bruno Sammartino left some massive shoes to fill once his career began to slow down, and while guys like Morales, Graham, and Backlund did their best, none were seemingly able to match the drawing power of the Italian Superman. Number 2. Sheamus and Roman Reigns for John Cena. The biggest problem WWE has always had in searching for a next top guy is trying to find somebody who's the next closest thing to the previous one. But history shows that almost never works. From Bruno to Hulk to Austin to Cena, the next top guy and flag bearer for the company is almost always pretty much the opposite of the previous one. We all love John Cena now, but I can vividly remember a time when he was the symbol of everything wrong with WWE. He won too much, he didn't sell enough, his gimmick was cheesy, he got less edgy, and his jokes were reduced to annoying sophomoric zingers about defecation and genitalia. Basically The Rock at his peak. And if we consider the Super Cena push exasperating, it got even worse once it became very obvious they were searching for his eventual replacement. The first victim, experiment, was with Sheamus in 2011. After a big heel run that began in 2009 and even saw him win the WWE title within months of his debut, out of nowhere the company decided to turn him babyface by standing up to Mark Henry for bullying other wrestlers on a random episode of SmackDown in July. The turn was unexpected and totally unearned, but the fans eventually got behind it, so better late than never. Sheamus won the Royal Rumble en route to WrestleMania 28, where he famously beat Daniel Bryan for the world title in under 20 seconds. But that squash ended up doing more for Bryan than it did for Sheamus, who was becoming more like Cena, and that the fans saw him as the corporate pick, compelling some of them to resist even more. I don't think a babyface Sheamus is a bad thing. We've seen how well in the last couple of years he can pull that off, but it seemed that in Vince McMahon's mind, if he was going to supplant John Cena, then obviously he needed to be funny. Therefore, he was often frequently programmed into stupid comedic bits that only compromised what made him cool to begin with. Think Smilin' Diesel, but Irish.
I see you more as an R. Kelly type of guy. You know R. Kelly? I believe I can fly! Whoa!
If your lip shits, what does your arse do?
But after all the badly written jokes, Sheamus still got off lucky. He never had to say "sufferin' succotash" or something even dumber, like this.
I thought Irishmen had potatoes. It looks like you're just smuggling some tater tots.
Oh sure, we loved Roman Reigns for a lot of the early 2020s. Tribal chief, head of the table, all that great stuff. But Roman had to endure years of getting the quote wrong reaction before getting the adoration and respect he has now. Fans really seem to like the strong, silent Reigns in small doses while he worked alongside Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose. When it came down to him and Batista at the 2014 Royal Rumble, the crowd was overwhelmingly in favor of him winning. But once the Shield broke up, some fans were already pushing back against his booking. It became very obvious that Reigns in particular was being groomed for success, but now WWE fans had gotten jaded from the John Cena mega push and they could spot a corporate champion from a mile away. To some of those fans, Roman was cool, but not as cool as the other Shield brothers. Maybe it's because he was the only one who wasn't allowed to carve out his own identity at first, continuing to rock the Shield gear and theme for years afterward. Maybe it's because it could be argued he was a Nepo hire, or because he began wearing blue contact lenses for some reason, or because it became common knowledge that the Shield was designed to make Roman the man in the end. Or maybe it's because he was made to utter some of the absolute worst, most dogshit comedic lines ever given to a top babyface in waiting. Whatever the combination, the fans were not ready to embrace the big dog as their next Cena. Especially because, how do I put this, John Cena was still there. It's one thing to smoothly pass a torch from an outgoing headliner to an incoming one, but it's a different thing entirely to try and create a whole new John Cena from scratch, push him to the moon, and expect him to hang with a guy who is still firmly in the driver's seat. Putting Roman and Cena together for that brief program in 2017 was one of the worst things they could have done for Reigns because it exposed that he was simply not ready.
When they look at you, they see what I see. A cheap-ass, corporately created John Cena bootleg. It's called a promo,
Shut
kid,
your
and
mouth,
if you want to
John.
be the big dog, you're going to have to learn how to do it, so go ahead. I'm still here because you can't do your job.
For years, it seemed that Roman's never-ending push was done only to aggravate the hardcore fans who begged for something different, an experiment in spite, knowing that the company could afford to turn off fans without facing any real financial consequence. Once Roman was able to evolve into a character that better reflected him personally, he grew into the era-defining superstar that we know him as today. So while Roman Reigns didn't replace John Cena, he sure as hell was an improvement from the Roman Reigns of old. Before we get to my pick for number 1, here are a few honorable mentions. CV Offie for Jimmy Snuka. The WWF waited a whole 2 years after Nancy Argentino's suspicious death to finally fire Jimmy Snuka in 1985, after slowly phasing him out of programming in the process. But the company caught wind of a guy named CV Offie, who wrestled Ric Flair for the world title in Hawaii earlier that same year, and signed him in an attempt to make their own homegrown Superfly, just without all the drugs and the possible homicide. While he had some talent, the WWF fans weren't buying it, and CV Offie was unable to fill those lack of shoes. Offie would be reduced to jobber status within months. Diesel and Razor Ramon for Diesel and Razor Ramon. The only reason a gimmick like this would have ever gotten greenlit would be if somebody was trying to make a point. And if there's one thing Vince McMahon loved to do, it was to air his grievances through the medium of wrestling. Fake Diesel and Razor, the supposed payoff for a storyline in which a bitter Jim Ross brought out a couple of phonies to spite Vince. But there was clearly no long-term goal. It was all done to create evidence in their lawsuit against WCW that Scott Hall and Kevin Nash portraying themselves on Turner TV made it impossible for the WWF to get anyone else over as those characters, thus damaging their intellectual property. Either that, or they thought the fans were just really stupid. The Wyatt Six for Bray Wyatt. What began as a seemingly good-hearted effort to honor the memory of the late Bray Wyatt turned into a cheesy, aimless novelty act that spent the better part of its existence fighting for a lantern. Like most things in the Wyatt-verse, unfortunately, the group began with a lot of intrigue, but ended up going nowhere, and as of this video, everyone involved is no longer with the company. The Renegade for the Ultimate Warrior. Brought in by Hulk Hogan as the ultimate surprise to counteract Ric Flair and Vader at Uncensored 95, the Renegade, aka Rene Gade, was exactly what he looked like, a cheap imitation of the Ultimate Warrior, the stopgap WCW had in place because they couldn't get the real thing. If it weren't for the fact that Rick Wilson actually looked great and could wrestle, it would be like when the WXO had that one jobber named Scott Nash. The fans hated the character, and WCW responded by having Jimmy Hart humiliate him in front of the world on Nitro. The Renegade stayed in WCW until his release in early '99, eventually falling into a deep depression and tragically taking his own life at age 33. And speaking of the Warrior, my pick for the biggest failed attempts to replace a top star is the Ultimate Warrior and Lex Luger for Hulk Hogan. Kevin Nash said it best recently, there's Hulk Hogan and there's everyone else. And for all that we talk about it and make fun of it to some extent, I believe the WWF's search for the next Hulk Hogan has been the company's greatest creative challenge in its history. His charisma and his connection to the audience has never been able to be faked or recaptured. Although you could argue that Randy Savage was the first one they tried doing this with, it's also somewhat obvious he was just keeping the belt warm for the Hulkster while he took a break from wrestling to film No Holds Barred. Meanwhile, when the Ultimate Warrior pinned Hogan at WrestleMania 6, it was clear we were seeing a true attempt to pass the torch. In theory, that is, Terry. Quit making it about yourself! As has been the case with so many champions over the decades, the company didn't seem willing to put all of their resources behind the Warrior. For instance, while he spent most of his reign feuding with people he or Hogan had already beaten, Hulk got to play with a shiny new monster heel in Earthquake first. Warrior was also missing that intangible relatability that truly makes tippy-top stars. You can imagine having a beer with Hulk Hogan, or John Cena, or obviously Steve Austin, but could you imagine sitting down for a drink with the Ultimate Warrior?
Speak to me, warrior!
Between Warrior's performance and overall viewer fatigue, the WWF put the kibosh on his push and put the belt back on Hulk Hogan by WrestleMania 7. What Warrior lacked in ring also followed him behind the curtain, as his terrible political and negotiating skills left him with multiple stop and start runs, leaving fans faithless. They'll tell you now that Warrior is on the same level as Hulk Hogan, but in real time, that was never the case. Now, it's been mentioned before on this channel, but it bears repeating that from very early on in his career, Lex Luger was considered to be the next Hulk Hogan. He had Hogan's size and tan, but was way more cut, and he had a full head of hair. Clearly, this was the next evolution. By his third year in the business, Luger was the hottest babyface in Jim Crockett Promotions, chasing Ric Flair in the NWA World title, but a combination of counterintuitive booking and some contractual issues between Turner and WCW left Lex in the cold. After several frustrating years where he finally became world champion under the worst of circumstances, Lex jumped first to Vince McMahon's Bodybuilding Federation before joining the WWF proper in 1993. After Hulk Hogan's comeback run flamed out at King of the Ring, it seemed the time was finally right for Lex to fulfill the destiny predicted in those magazines all those years ago. But again, like with JCP, the WWF refused to commit fully to the All-American Lex. An empty count-out victory in his match with Yokozuna at SummerSlam 93 left his heat on simmer, and by the Royal Rumble, it was clear that the die-hard fans, pretty much the only ones left at this point, wanted to see Bret Hart back on top over Luger. Lex slid down the card until he'd been relegated to a tag team with Davey Boy Smith by 1995 and saw that it was time to get out of Dodge, taking a lowball deal to return to WCW. And while he couldn't fill Hogan's shoes, he was the first man to beat him by submission in any kind of televised match. So there. But who else do you think belongs on this list? What were some of the other big attempts to replace top stars? I am aware this countdown is very America-centric, and I'm sure there are other great stories from Japan or Mexico of stars in very similar situations. I apologize for not having them on this list, but hey, if you know of some, please let me know in the comments section below. I'm Zane, and I'll see you next time.